Hello, folks. It's March the 5th, 2023. This is Bennett Bonus from Truth versus News, and he's got some things to share that'll open up the skies and let the sun shine in on some subjects that, we need to know about. Go ahead.
Well, Don, there was a article that came out and it rang my bell pretty loudly because it resonated with so much of my entire life experience. You know, I was born in Scotland. I was raised in a Scottish clan sort of family. My dad was German American, but was raised more in a Scottish home, and there's just a different culture, a different environment,
Wait,
and there's just a different kind of environment. And so the upbringing of a Scottish culture and lore and clan and family and the whole Celtic environment was quite different than what has grown in America that I saw in the 80s. And it gave me a certain inoculation against a lot of the corrosives that have been pervading in American society. And I see both my upbringing and also what I studied when I was in college, my experience in college in a fraternity, quite wild days, of course. But in the 1990s, we were, a very healthy, if not a little bit liberal in our romantic activities, if you will, as young men in a fraternity. But we didn't have the wokeism and the transgenderism and the lesbian feminism and all of that to the degree that we have now. And so we had a much healthier romantic landscape and sexual attraction and healthy relationships between young men and women in the 90s. And then, of course, we've seen American schools and culture and education and media completely begin to deform and go into this grotesque monstrosity called wokeism. And I studied a lot of this in Heritage Foundation when I was doing my PhD and dissertation. I developed a whole social science database, which people can get off my website. I've got a book on the multidimensional social
right.
science aspects of man, and it's called multidimensionalizing social science research findings. You can go to the website shellgamewhistleblower.com. But I
Okay.
studied all of this, and I saw very clearly, working under Rob Rector and Pat Fagan and Ed Fulner and Carlson and Family Research Council, and also when I was in the Bush administration, I saw the correlation between healthy society and unhealthy society when it begins to destroy its sexual dimension, its sexual romantic attraction between men and women, when it begins to effeminize men and masculinize women and encourage non-binding marriages in place of fornication and live-in relationships, which leads to nothing but hostility and breakup and anger and resentment. So for 20, 30 years, we have seen America devolve into quite a monstrosity when it comes to its attitudes and its behaviors relating to young men and women, but particularly women. And this article talks about the devastating impact leftist liberal wokeism has had upon young women in particular. So I wanted to read this article and comment about it. But first, let me bring up a couple scenes just to give it some context here. The picture you have there of a young woman, hiding behind a mirror. Is she there? Is she not? Can you see her? Very pretty young lady, very attractive, but with a sign of fear and emptiness in her. That's the slow erasure of traditional feminine character in young women. They're trying to supplant it and replace it with a masculinized, multiple tattooed aggression and coarseness. And the result has been a transition from that image to, let me show you this image. Now,
Okay.
this is the image
Ah,
that they're really trying to turn young women into. They're trying to turn them into a monstrosity between Greta Van Thunberg and Golem from Lord of the Rings.
yeah,
This
yeah.
particular cartoon was titled "Let Them Eat Bugs to Save the Planet," and she's eating a bowl full of cockroaches and I don't know, drinking urine or something. But I thought that was a particularly effective cartoon because look at the face.
That was
Look at the
terrible.
blank monster face of this golem girl, Greta Van Susteren, Greta Van Thunberg, that they're trying, I think, seriously to forcibly impregnate into the minds and psyches and souls of young ladies.
Mhm.
And the reason I wanted to talk about this, Don, is because as a man, as a Scotsman, as a warrior, as a masculine man, I see our duty is to stand up and defend the young women in America and the world, but in America, these young girls between 0 and 25, uh, you can try and help as many as you can, but those are the formative years. And we as men have a duty to step in and shield and protect and defend the feminine purity, the feminine softness, which does not depreciate or detract from the intrinsic feminine strengths that women have. Women are pillars of society. I've seen more women stand up and file legal challenges against the COVID-19 draconian policies than men ever have. I've seen women in Alameda down the street form a team and go in and hurl the stones of motions, legal filings against the Alameda County Board of Supervisors, the Los Angeles School District, and win. No men have, women have risen up and taken this down. So I'm not detracting from the strengths of women, but I'm also recognizing and affirming that women and their natural feminine instincts and their soul and their biology and how God made them must be preserved and protected and encouraged and celebrated
Yes.
and glorified with deep worshiping affection, not in an idolatry religious worship, but as men praising God for his greatest creation, which is a woman.
Yep.
She was his last and
Yep.
greatest creation, taking him from the rib of Adam when he is at the depths of his loneliness and sadness in an he's an unfallen state. So trip on that for a second. So Adam is at the lowest, most uh, difficult time of his existence, recognizing that every other creature has a mate except him.
Mhm.
And then God, in his sleep, pulls and forms woman from his side. And he looks and I think he falls to his knees and says, she shall be bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And Adam knew his wife, and she became his wife, his helpmate, his completion. The two shall become one flesh, and with God in between them, fathom love beyond reach. And that's what we've lost in modern society over the last 100 years. So what we need to do is rise up against this. And I wanted to show too the effect of this is another symbol. And let me bring this one up too before we jump into the article. And this is a video of a transgender individual, I believe in Germany, accosting a Muslim woman for wearing her hijab. And you see
Mm.
what happens to him when three young Muslim men in Germany rise up to defend this woman. So watch this; it's quite good. So just one more time, this is a transgender German attacking a woman with a hijab, and she's defended by these Muslim men.
Right, I see that.
Trying to pull off her hijab. Right? She's an older lady too, in her 60s, 70s. And he's a big guy. He's attacking. And here come the Muslim men to her defense. Hits him in the face. Then three others come. And they may not be Muslim. They come right at him.
Mm-hmm.
And he runs off. So I'm not advocating violence, of course. So I'm not advocating violence, of course, but that caught my eye because I've had an affinity and a support for the Muslim men who are defending a Muslim woman to wear her hijab.
Sure.
It is a sign of respect and piety to God. They're not forcing other women to wear it. And to have this lunatic transgender German thing going attacking an older woman can only be met by the defensive violence against the violence coming against her. So in some cases, that sort of an attack can only be met with equal violence. It's war. It's war, and this is where we're coming. Are these sort of individuals who have become so brainwashed, deformed, wounded, drugged, hurt, broken, from broken families, without parents, who knows what they've come from. But the bottom line is they have transformed into monsters, into Frankenstein lunatics, and maybe on all kinds of drugs too. And in a sense, I don't care. In a sense, it's not my problem. In a sense, I'm not there to be their therapist, to be their counselor, to talk them off the ledge. That's not my role. My role, and the point of this special edition, is to affirm in men our role, our mission is to stand between these women, the traditional values women. Our role is to stand between them and these lunatics and stop women from being assaulted and attacked and destroyed. That's our role. Mm-hmm. We are men, we are warriors, we are expected to rise up and defend our women. I don't care what ethnicity they are, what culture, what color. If they're traditional family values women, I mean, if they're women in general, we are to step in and defend against these large, brutal German men who are dressing and pretending they're women and showing an obvious hatred for traditional values women. So we have a role and a calling to step in and defend violently if need be, as that scenario, that video demonstrates. Now, it's not just physically, but it's mentally, it's culturally, it's informationally, it's entertainment-wise, it's on all of the directional avenues of information, of communication that are coming into women. We have a duty as men to be shields for them. And I'm not saying we have to interject ourselves and say, we know best, stand behind us, we'll tell you what to do, we'll tell you what to think. I'm not saying that. I am not about going out and trying to shield and defend the angry, lunatic, multiple pierced, multiple tattooed, purple-haired, green-haired, fat lesbian man-haters. I'm not advocating for getting in between them. They've chosen their path. And it's not my duty to run down that path and grab them by the scruff of the neck and haul them back onto my path. It's not my calling. I don't care about them. They've made their path. My job, my calling, my duty as a man is to defend other women who don't want to go down that path, who don't want to be captured and enslaved and dragged and tattooed and pierced and raped by the feminine bull dykes and the effeminate beta males who pretend they're women and then go into these prisons and rape the women. Our job is to protect women from that demonism. And I have no problem doing it on every level. So that's why this strikes a chord, and it requires an engagement psychologically and physically for men to be shields. And part of that is being not just masculine, but chivalrous, gentlemanly, valorous. We are men. We're not women. Men and women are made differently. Men are more predisposed to the cold, hard logic and bloodless surgical war and combat and fighting in law, in military, than women are. Women are strong. Women have gifts and such that men don't, but I'm not going to belabor this. But men are made a certain way. We're being called now more than ever to prove that. Now, let me read this article that prompted a lot of this reaffirmation. And these are things I've known for a long time, and I've written numerous books and such about it. But this article encapsulates a lot of this. Let me just read this, and I'll share. Let me screen share it too. So this is the article we were going to do with Jim Fetzer on Truth versus News, but we couldn't really fit it in, so I wanted to do it here. And the article was on WorldNet Daily, and you can type it in. Why do 30% of girls want to die? Why do 30% of girls want to die? And I knew the answer instantly because I've been thinking about this and writing about this for 20 years. And the article goes on to say, this is written by Patrice Lewis. When I was young, early in the 80s, modern feminism was on the ascendancy. We were strong, we were invincible, we could look forward to careers, we were competing with men in the workplace. Above all, and this was critically important, we insisted on being regarded for our brains, not our bodies. Gone were the days when women were viewed as irrational, emotional creatures unable to withstand the stresses of the workplace. We had transcended our lady parts and emerged as purely intellectual creatures, or so the theory went. In practice, of course, things didn't go quite that smoothly. Those women who truly were career-minded settled into their vocations and clawed their way to the top. Well, I wouldn't say that. Those who were less competent and presumably unable to compete with men in their chosen fields became radical feminists raging against the unfairness of the patriarchy. Crucially, these radical feminists found the one place they could dominate: education. What's the old line? Those who can do, those who can't teach. Whether in K-12 or at the university level, these ladies found themselves in the enviable position of indoctrinating the next generation of children and young adults into their unorthodox theories. And I remember quite vividly, Don, when I was an undergraduate at San Jose State, taking a women's studies class just because it filled up a certain time block of my schedule and it satisfied a certain humanities requirement. So I thought, what the hell? It's funny because all the big football players took this class too, women's studies. They thought it was an easy A. You know, you go, you sit, you listen. Well, that was true. You go, and this was back in 1992, 3, I think it was, 93. And we're all sitting in, big football players, myself and others, and they had women in there. But it was taught not by a radical, angry black woman feminist today, but it was like an Indian black lady. And she's advancing a lot of these theories, a lot of this, this speculative, is America a patriarchal society and this, and everyone's kind of looking around going, this is bullshit. This is just silly. This is a waste of our time. We want to be out, enjoying life. And that was the key issue. We and young people today want to be out enjoying life, enjoying their bodies and their relationships more within moral constraints, their relationships with other young men and women, not being indoctrinated with poisonous, self-immolating forms of envy, jealousy, resentment, and victimization. And that's what a lot of this theoretical academic instruction tries to inculcate in people. Continuing on, having been in charge of education for the last several decades, the fruit of their radical teaching is now becoming apparent. According to CDC data from 2021, almost 6 out of 10 girls felt persistently sad or hopeless, the highest numbers ever recorded. And it gets worse. Consider this tragic column by August Mayrot. Quote, trained to hate their sex and selves. 1 in 3 teen girls now considers suicide. 1 in 3 teen girls now considers suicide. These statistics reflect an increase of 60% from just a decade ago. Quote, what's especially troubling about this report is how it runs counter to today's conventional wisdom, notes Marriott. After all, our society allegedly celebrates women more than ever and offers abundant opportunities to girls. Furthermore, women are doing much better than men in some crucial areas, outnumbering them at colleges and in the workplace. But that doesn't bring happiness. Moreover, strong female protagonists abound in popular movies and television shows. Women have more representation in politics and sports. Schools continually push girls to achieve and break glass ceilings. No longer do girls live in a world where they're expected to find a husband, have children, and submit to lifelong domestic drudgery. They can do anything. Well, I would say any woman with a sense of wholeness and wholesomeness understands finding a husband is a very good thing. And having children is a wonderful thing. And lifelong commitment and marriage and relationship and love is a very good thing. And God says, if a man findeth the wife, he findeth a good thing. So, and God said it's not good for the man to be alone. He also says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. And women, submit yourselves to your husband, not in a form of slavery, but in submitting the woman to the husband who recognizes the husband is the king and the crown of the family. And God has made him that and made woman to be under the husband as a covering. There's an entire blessing and a complementariness that is the true spiritual recipe for happiness and fulfillment in the individual woman's souls and the man's soul. When the man is made the crown and the covering for the wife, and she submits and recognizes that, and recognizes his authority as God's man covering over the family, there's tremendous blossoming of faith and patience and gentleness in the man, and the same with the woman. So these things are set by God according to our design to maximize our peace, our happiness, our productivity upon this earth within the confines of lifelong marriage and relationships. Yes, you're going to have trouble. Yes, you're going to get fired from your jobs. Yes, you're going to run out of money, or you're going to have disease, or you're going to have accidents, and all sorts of things of life are going to intervene. But that's life. We're living in a fallen world. And that's the other big thing, is this humanist attempt to make the world perfect and eradicate pain and suffering is a fool's journey. It's folly, because we know the world is fallen and sinful and is man. Redemption, of course, as a Christian, comes through Christ. But I just wanted to give that little side note here.
Okay.
And the other thing is women in movies and such, like Tomb Raider, shooting guns, doing sidekicks, beating the heck out of 5 men at the same time. That's easy when you have a director telling the men to fall down. That's easy when you have a fight stunt coordinator saying, okay, she's going to pretend to hit you and you're going to fall backwards. All of that's fantasy. But the fantasy is what they're feeding young girls, and this whole thing is becoming very, very toxic to their understanding of reality. And that toxicity is causing a lot of this debilitating self-depression, and because it's in conflict with their nature. That's
Yeah.
the heart of the article. This modern reality is at heart in conflict with the heart of the nature of woman. If this is true, then why do 1/3 of girls want to kill themselves, and why do 2/3 feel persistently sad or hopeless? Mayrat doesn't pin the blame solely on toxic feminism. I might add, he also attacks social media and the transgender movement. Social media, he says, is dangerous for teen girls because of its addictiveness and the promotion of unattainable ideals. The transgenderism movement, too, argues that sex is fluid and that changing one's sex will make someone happier. I would add to the social media dimension the TikTok, Instagram videos of these girls flashing their bikini butts and waving their breasts and doing all sorts of voyeurism and almost soft porn when they're 13, 14, 15, 16. None of this existed when I was a young man in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, thank God. None of this existed in high school or even college. We didn't have cell phones when I was in college, or these rampant computers. We didn't have laptops. But now social media has become so sexually degenerate. Young girls are out there creating, accounts on their social accounts. OnlyFans, it's called, and I don't know it, but I've seen it in my research that this exists. OnlyFans are young girls will create an account, and voyeuristic, predatory, desperate men will pay money to see them in all sorts of lurid, compromise, sexually provocative attire and positions. And they're under 18. This is happening in America. This has led to the sexual degeneracy and disrespecting of young women. Young women in their own souls recognize that it's just, for their sexual degradation and showing their body that they're getting attention, but there's nothing of their personality or their spirit that's being appreciated by men. And this adds to a depression and a harshness and a coarseness. Ironically, according to the column by Alex Newman in the New American, the federal government suggested that government schools could and should be the solution to the crisis they have caused. In reality, the escalating godlessness, immorality, humanism, and ever more extreme comprehensive sex education being forced on children in indoctrination centers masquerading as public schools are almost certainly the primary source of the problem. Adding more of the same is tantamount to throwing gasoline on this deadly dumpster fire. Side note, reason 5,402,248 to home school. Sort of a comical observation. In all events, however, the underlying message to young girls is clear. No matter what, they're not good enough. No matter what, they're not good enough. They're not pretty enough, smart enough, popular enough, or witty enough. Yes, being a girl is no longer good enough. Maybe if they chop off their lady parts and replace them with man parts, that will all change. Forget brains. They must be disregarded at worst and remolded into the opposite gender at best. Gone is the quaint, old-fashioned feminism that merely discouraged girls from being homemakers. Well, I'd say that was the first evil that came in, because that was precisely what young girls were so naturally inclined to become and do as young women.
Natural.
It gave them fulfillment. It gave them purpose. It gave them love. It gave them marriage and husbands and children. Husbands, mind you, that worshipped the wife as the heart of the house. And this whole notion of it being an enslavement of women is actually the opposite. I remember a professor of mine, Klaus Schwinn, had a conversation with me, and he said, Scott, women have lost all of their power since they got the vote. Women have lost all of their power since they were pushed out of the home. And who's that benefited? Beta males and predators and economic, lustful economic banksters and such that wanted to depress men's wages by putting women in the workforce so they can pay women less and men less by having a flood of excess labor. Before that, you had one man who was the breadwinner, who went out into the world in his gray flannel suit, had a jocular relationship. I mean, Mad Men does have some very interesting social roles, but men went out and exercised life. Women were at home, not only keeping the home functional, but keeping the communities functional, keeping the schools functional, watching and listening and keeping everything taut, meaning tight and tense, so that the community and the home and the different families were functional. This was the 1940s and 50s America that began to fray and dissolve in the 1960s, and then with all of this perversion, really in the 1970s, 80s, accelerated. And it's just been a slow leaking of the dam ever since. Yes, being a girl is no longer good enough. Maybe, oh, we read that part. Now the radical leftists are encouraging girls to compete in the workplace by becoming men. And people wonder why teen girls are suicidal. It's too much for vulnerable adolescents to handle. That's exactly right. People forget when you're an adolescent, you're vulnerable. You're emotionally, physically questioning. You're vulnerable. You don't have the life experience or the wisdom to process and understand and define these feelings, these energies, these hormones, these chemicals, these relationships. And this has been preyed upon and translated. This confusion of natural biological processing from puberty, that's a fever, that's a storm that subsides when the young person reaches 17, 18, and then they become a young adult. That whole experience of puberty between 6th grade and being a sophomore, junior in high school has been turned into a opportunity to demoralize and transgenderize and destroy young people in the name of Noah Harari's end goal, which is in 100 years we won't have sexes, we won't have gender. That's at the heart of the lunatic.
That's not good.
From socio-political commentary to romance writing, Patrice Lewis branches into the world of Amish inspirational fiction. These clean romances are wholesome enough for grandma to read. Check it out. She has an advertisement, but that's an interesting observation of writing romance novels with romantic subject matter, but with the world of Amish inspirational moral restraints. It's like the Waltons. I'm not going to go down the whole transgender rabbit hole, which is too big of a subject for one column. Rather, I'm asking this: why is it so bad to be a girl? What are these girls learning in school that makes them hate themselves so much that they want to die? When did leftists become so anti-girl? When did it become a bad thing for a girl to be happy she's a girl? Why must her young mind be warped by lies that she's not good enough to reach her full potential unless she denies her biology or amputates her healthy lady parts? What happened to the classic feminist mantra that women must be regarded only for their brains, not their bodies? This is the new generation of leftists. Those who hate themselves, I've said that ad nauseum, those who hate themselves, and I would add hate God, and want to spread that hate to the next generation. Does this sound like a healthy attitude? Of course not. But these are the fruits of radical leftism in general and toxic feminism in particular: self-hate and suicide. And of course, if you argue with the cause, you're branded with the usual accusations: bigot, racist, whatever. Whatever your views on these enormous issues, you must admit the fallout is tragic. 1/3 of our girls should not be considering suicide. 2/3 should not be feeling persistently sad or hopeless. Although if the left's goal is to reduce the human population on the planet, then having 1/3 of teen girls remove themselves from the gene pool is certainly consistent with their goals.
Huh.
If these statistics are accurate, it means something has gone very, very much amiss in our society. We need to reverse course and affirm that girls are just fine the way they are. And I would say they are fearfully and wonderfully made. And all this doesn't even touch on what the left is doing to the mental health of boys. There was a book called The War on Boys people should read. I sincerely hope the statistics from the CDC are wrong and that it's a gross exaggeration that 1/3 of girls want to kill themselves because they've learned to hate what they are. But if those statistics are correct, now listen very carefully, then radical feminism, liberalism, liberal wokeness, and every other toxic leftist agenda must take blame for every life taken.
Yep.
So that is the article. I think it was very, very good, and I would encourage people to go to the link. And I know you'll put it up in the box here, Don. Why do 30% of girls want to die? So let me just wrap it up by saying this. This is happening in our society. This is happening in America. This is happening in Britain. This is happening in Germany. This is happening in Canada and Australia. It's not happening in Russia. It's not happening in Iran. It's not happening in Palestine. It is happening in Israel. It's not happening in Africa. But it's not happening in China either. But it's happening in the West, right? For some, let's just say spiritual evil is running amok in the West. And I've said before, I think this evil that's coming upon us is because of the evil that we've sown and destroyed other nations and people for 20 years. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I shall repay. We're being repaid back by these sort of pathologies and sicknesses in America because of what we've done. Now, that being said, there is a fix to all of this. There is a way to handle this. Number one, you have to face the issue head on. You have to, if you have daughters, you have to print an article like this. And as a father, and as a mother, but as a father, this is a man's role. You have to read this to your daughter, and you have to show compassion. And it's okay to have a tear well up in your eye and show your daughter, or your niece, how much you care for them and love them and want to protect them, because it's been precisely because we haven't stood up and burned these sort of things down from the beginning that they've grown like a cancer. So you have to read this sort of an article, and there's other good books on it we can put links to, but you have to be aware of the situation, and then you have to truly embrace the understanding of physical touch and physical affection and hugs and the essentialness that is to young girls. You have to, as a man, show deep affection and deep protective hugging and circling arms, bear hug arms, and holding your daughters close and softly saying, you're the pride of life. God has made you biologically. You're different than men. You've got other talents and callings and gifts, and those will come naturally. And these people and forces in the world that are trying to advance this sickness, this mental sickness, have to be rejected as very miserable, sad, sick people. Don't let your sympathy for fools make you one of them, Balthazar Gracian said. So you have to share with young girls, this is not about a difference of opinion. This is sick, mentally deranged, unhealthy, angry, suicidal people putting in pretty words and with college-educated degrees and white shirts and academic positions, lies and poison, because they themselves have been lied to and poisoned, and they're miserable, unhealthy people. And in many senses, it may require pulling your daughters out of schools and homeschooling them, pulling them out of university and choosing a different path, because this is not about learning to be a doctor or a lawyer or engineer or some sort of other form of vocation. This is about taking girls and putting them into a meat grinder and turning them into something that is more damaged and unhealthy when they come out. I can say with absolute authority too, when young girls go to these colleges and universities and are fed this sexual exploitive, sleep with all sorts of men and such like that, they come out of college far more damaged, far
Right.
more bitter, far more lonely and isolated and hurting than they ever did before because they're used as prostitutes. Colleges, universities, fraternities, now they have date rape drugs. Women go into college hoping to meet Mr. Right, hoping that they'll be raised and elevated on a level and appreciated by a Prince Charming, and suddenly, the birds will sing and flutter and rainbows will appear in the sky, and a pathway with prancing unicorns on each side is going to call the young girl to absolute bliss and harmony and fulfillment and happiness. And to a certain extent, that can happen. That is true. People go to college, women go to colleges to meet Mr. Right, to find themselves, to blossom. But it's essential for young girls to protect themselves, protect their virtue, and understand that their virginity, their holy identity is the most precious thing that they have.
Right.
And most precious young men value that and see that as the purest form of a bond for a marriage like bond relationship, marital
Yeah.
bond is that virginity. So we cannot disregard these ideas of virginity and purity and women being feminine in their biology and their natures and men being masculine in firebrands and their natures. That's the way God made them. We cannot disregard those as quaint old-fashioned notions and modern times have changed. No, the times have changed for the worse. The environment has changed for the worse. It's become more toxic, more sickly, more bitter, more angry. This article points it out. Why do 30% of the girls want to die today? They didn't want to die 40 years ago. They went with exuberance, and all you need to do is tap into some of the old movies from the 1940s and 50s on Turner Classic Movies, and you will see a stark comparison, a contrast to the joy and the happiness and the flirtatiousness and the femininity in young women in the 40s and the 50s, and a delight and a glorying of their beauty, dressing and looking wonderful with their hair and their makeup and their, women are made by God to be the most beautiful creatures
Yep.
on earth.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
we have stripped them of that and tried to destroy that by this evil, devilish agenda of deforming them out of their natural beauty into men. So there's a lot of things that we need to do to begin to correct it, but it starts in the home. It starts with the individual. It starts with physical touch and affection and protective, manly, valorous guarding of your young daughters, your young nieces, your granddaughters, and being honest and showing this article to speak for you, being honest that there are forces and people and agencies and agendas and institutions that are trying to destroy the difference between men and women, and it's a sign of the times. But we can't go that direction. We have to stand against that wind, and we have to stand as the shields for our daughters and our nieces to hide behind and feel like they have protectors, they have defenders who will, like those young men, rise up and defend a woman from being assaulted and brutalized and killed by this transgender lunatic man. We are called to be those men and to stand and defend women against those individuals, both the transgender lunatic men and the bull dyke lesbian, purple-haired, tattooed, multiple pierced ring, bull dyke aggressive women who've lost their minds. Both of those groups, I don't care about. They're dead. They're roadkill. But my agenda, my mission, is to stand as a shield for those young women who have not been polluted or harmed, and to stop them from ever being polluted or harmed or brainwashed from this toxicity. We have to be the wall to stop all of this
Yeah,
and to
okay.
change direction and create new curriculums, new schools, new books, new lectures, all about this that celebrate women's natural feminine instincts and beauty and gifts and encourages the complementariness of men and women and emphasizes the permanency of a lifelong bond in marriage with sexual purity being the glue that holds them together. So I would end it there and encourage
Yeah.
people to go to this link and get the story and be a force of good and truth and love for a world where these young girls desperately need men, not women,
Mhm.
men
Yeah.
stepping up and being this voice of love and compassion and truth.
Yeah, so essentially, we want to go back to basics, the very basics that God brought us to, not this modern stuff that has been polluting our brain and society and redirecting us to all kinds of different colorful, miscreant stuff. So let's get back to basics, and I think that'll be the best. So thank you, Scott, for this important message, basic message today. Okay, so
Thank you, Don.
okay, okay, so take care on March 5th. We'll see you later.